Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are focusing on a really major choice facing millions of retirees, purchasing a home in a 55-plus active adult community. This choice, well, it promises a unique blend of downsizing, low upkeep, and a vibrant social life. It's often marketed almost like a perpetual vacation.
But I think the core tension we really have to address is whether those advertised sort of resort-style benefits truly outweigh the inherent long-term constraints. Things like the significant financial risks, the often highly restrictive rules, and maybe most importantly, the crucial absence of integrated healthcare infrastructure.
Right. And I hold that the convenience and the deep structural social engagement offered by these communities really do create an optimal environment for the active retirement lifestyle. They allow residents to shift focus away from those maintenance burdens and more towards, well, personal fulfillment.
And I'm going to argue that the non-negotiable limitations and, frankly, the potentially hidden costs present significant long-term drawbacks. Drawbacks that ultimately challenge financial flexibility, limit personal independence, and threaten security when health, as it inevitably does for many, declines.
Okay, well, let me start. For me, the primary appeal of the active adult community is the comprehensive freedom it provides, specifically freedom from, well, labor. The low-maintenance lifestyle is absolutely the key selling point. Things like exterior maintenance, landscaping, snow removal, all of these burdensome chores are handled centrally by the Homeowners Association, the HOA. This is valuable time recovered, which is exactly what retirement is supposed to be about, isn't it? Furthermore, the extensive amenities, the fitness centers, the pickleball courts, the resort-style pools, and all the organized activities, these are designed specifically to cultivate immediate social engagement. And when you are situated among peers, people in the same stage of life, it inherently ensures a generally quiet environment and a sort of built-in community network. And crucially, the homes themselves are often specifically designed for older adults, featuring things like single-story, accessible layouts, minimizing maintenance both inside and out.
I see that point, but I tend to frame this entire discussion around long-term viability and financial security. And that low maintenance promise you mentioned, it's immediately tied to significant and often rapidly rising financial costs. HOA fees are frequently higher than maybe anticipated, and almost universally, they increase annually. And look, this isn't just about paying for the pool. It's really about paying for the management of the entire community structure. Beyond that rising cost burden, residents often sign away significant personal freedom. We see strict HOA rules limiting everything from, minor issues like paint color and fencing, to really major decisions like whether you can even rent out your own unit. But perhaps the greatest constraint, as I mentioned earlier, is the lack of long-term security. These communities are fundamentally distinct from options like a continuing care retirement community, or CCRC, which provides a guaranteed continuum of housing and health services. A 55-plus community provides no such safety net. That means any significant decline in health will inevitably trigger a stressful, costly, and potentially forced relocation.
I see why you emphasize the rising costs. But let me give you a maybe different perspective on the financial value proposition here. The comprehensive nature of those HOA fees covers essential, burdensome services that, if you perform them individually, would consume time, effort, and honestly, often comparable cost. Exterior home upkeep, lawn care, uninterrupted access to high-quality resort-style amenities. That convenience provides clear financial value. It essentially transforms what would be domestic labor hours into leisure hours. And we shouldn't overlook potential affordability boosts either. Homes in 55-plus communities tend to be sized appropriately for downsizing, and residents often benefit from slightly lower property taxes because the community typically contributes fewer children to the local school district, which reduces that funding demand.
That's an interesting point regarding property taxes and the concept of buying time. I'll grant you that. But I would frame the hidden cost structure differently, especially for those on fixed incomes. Frankly, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning.
because the fees often hide unexpected and sometimes quite significant financial shocks. The most notorious mechanism for this is the special assessment. This happens when the HOA's reserves, that's basically their savings account for major future repairs like replacing roads, roofs, or renovating the clubhouse, are insufficiently funded. Instead of raising regular monthly fees steadily over time, the HOA hits residents with a massive lump sum bill, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, that must be paid immediately. Buyers absolutely must perform rigorous due diligence. They need to insist on seeing the community's reserve study and recent budget minutes to really gauge the financial solvency.
You are absolutely right to highlight the need for due diligence on those reserves. Buyers should certainly insist on seeing a financially sound association. I agree. However, those surprise special assessments, while yes, painful, are arguably symptomatic of poor management, not necessarily inherent flaws in the structure itself. The real value, I still maintain, is in the underlying infrastructure and the services provided reliably.
But the fee complexity often goes beyond just the reserves. Have you considered the layering of fees? Many of these larger communities operate under a kind of multi-tiered management system. So you might pay a master community fee to the larger development for roads, shared gates, maybe a big central facility, and then a separate independent sub-community fee for your specific little enclave's landscaping and perhaps a smaller clubhouse. This duplication, you've got two boards, two sets of management costs, can make the total monthly expense much, much higher than anticipated. And as I think I touched on earlier, some, particularly luxury communities, impose fees for amenities that are not optional. Things like mandatory annual food and beverage minimums at the community restaurant, regardless of whether you ever actually eat there. That feels like restricted spending, not really financial freedom.
Okay, fair point on the layered fees. That's something to watch for. But let's shift to the social dimension for a moment, because this is where I think the 55-plus structure truly distinguishes itself. The age restriction is actually critical for maintaining the intended, quiet, peer-focused lifestyle that, frankly, so many retirees actively seek out. The legal requirement, often referred to as the 80-20 rule, mandates that at least 80% of occupied units must have one person who is 55 or older. This rule is really what ensures the community vibe stays consistent, focused on shared interests, and lower traffic and noise levels, typically associated with younger demographics or family neighborhoods.
I'm afraid that homogeneity, while potentially quiet, comes with potentially significant social and emotional costs, primarily, I think, impacting family life. While the 80-20 rule maintains the peer group, the often very strict rules about younger visitors, including explicit limitations on the length of stay for grandchildren or minor-aged children, can be a profound drawback. For many retirees, having family visit for extended periods is, one of the great joys of retirement, and these rules often require guests to leave after just 30 days, sometimes even less. That's a real emotional sacrifice that's essentially built into the contract.
Well, those rules, you have to understand, are designed to protect the integrity of the contract that all the residents bought into. It ensures that the community doesn't accidentally lose its 55-plus designation and effectively become just a standard family neighborhood, which isn't what people paid for. Furthermore, rules concerning guests and security measures like gated entrances and mandatory visitor sign-in, they maintain the integrity and peace of the community. That's often a major draw for security-conscious homeowners. And the shared social life, encouraged by all those amenities and special interest clubs, is just crucial for fostering lasting friendships and actively combating the isolation that can be a major concern in later life.
I understand the argument for structure, I do. But it's not just about guests visiting. It's about personal autonomy over what is likely your largest financial asset. The really strict HOA restrictions on exterior modifications, things like paint color, specific fencing materials, sometimes even limitations on solar panel installation, mean you don't truly own the look or function of your home's exterior. You own the interior, sure, but the curb appeal belongs to the committee. And when we talk about autonomy, we inevitably must return to the critical issue of health.
Okay, on health. The fundamental assumption of these 55-plus communities is active adult living. The resident is expected to maintain independence. That means they can perform activities of daily living, like bathing and dressing, and instrumental activities of daily living, like managing finances or driving. These communities are specifically designed to provide amenities for wellness, not to replace skilled nursing or offer assisted living services on site. They strategically ensure proximity to necessary external services, like high-quality hospitals, specialists, and often major transport hubs like airports. The emphasis is clearly on supporting independent living for as long as humanly possible.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that framework entirely because it relies heavily on the, frankly, costly assumption that the resident will always be able to move when their health needs change. You mentioned ADLs and IADLs, which, yes, are the benchmarks for independence, but if those benchmarks begin to fail, the community itself offers no predictable security net. You are forced onto the open market to find assisted living, likely under duress, likely when you're vulnerable. This is fundamentally different from a CCRC, which offers that predictable care integration, usually all in one roof or on one campus.
But isn't there a choice there? If a retiree doesn't want to subsidize the potentially very high cost of a CCRC, which often requires massive upfront entrance fees, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, the 55-plus model offers a different kind of financial flexibility. The resident manages their own health risk through insurance or savings, rather than baking the potential cost of future nursing care into their initial housing investment.
That assumes you can exit the investment easily when needed. And compounding the health risk is the resale potential. That restricted buyer pool, you can generally only sell to buyers who are 55 or older, limits the number of potential purchasers quite dramatically. This directly impacts market liquidity. If you need to sell quickly, perhaps due to a sudden health event, or if you need to liquidate the asset to pay for expensive outside care, the house can languish on the market much longer than a traditional home. And it could potentially yield a lower price because of that time pressure. If time is truly of the essence, that restricted buyer pool can turn the home into a frozen, illiquid asset precisely when cash is needed most.
While the buyer pool is certainly smaller, yes, the properties often appeal very strongly to that specific demographic segment, which can help maintain competitive pricing, provided the community amenities are well maintained and the HOA is financially sound. The financial rigor you rightly call for should extend to the entire retirement planning process. Buyers should ensure they have sufficient non-housing savings to address potential health crises without needing to sort of panic sell their primary residence. The 55-plus community is primarily an active lifestyle choice. It's not intended as a comprehensive financial or healthcare safety net in itself.
And that, I think, is the crucial point of distinction. The resident must understand they are purchasing a lifestyle that absolutely requires a separate external plan for their potential future decline. And that plan might be jeopardized by the very liquidity strains created by the community structure itself.
So the core message remains, from my perspective, if the goal is a lifestyle shift toward activity, social connection, and that immediate freedom from exterior maintenance burdens, a 55-plus community offers, unmatched structural advantages. This holds true, but, as you've stressed, provided buyers perform exhaustive due diligence, especially on the HOA's financial health, the rules governing guests and personalization, and really investigating those multiple fee structures thoroughly to manage financial expectations.
Right. And while the allure of resort-style amenities and the convenience of low upkeep is certainly compelling, I urge prospective buyers to look rigorously beyond that initial attraction. They must evaluate the true long-term financial cost of restricted freedom from potentially high and layered HOA fees, the ever-present risk of special assessments, and critically assess the complex risks associated with the lack of integrated future care and that limited, potentially slow-moving resale market.
I think the material we've discussed today clearly underscores that choosing an active adult community is a deeply personal decision. It's about balancing today's desires for freedom and activity against the realities of tomorrow.
Absolutely. A decision that requires a disciplined approach, balancing the convenience of a shared peer environment with rigorous, realistic, long-term planning and financial foresight. That's essential to secure both health and wealth in the final decades of life.